Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the subject of the talk today being Black history as the lost pages of human history. Actually, the quote itself comes from the great Pan-Africanist historian, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, who spoke about Black history in this way and looked at the way in which the history of people of African descent and of Africa itself had to be functionally distorted to justify transatlantic slavery and colonialism in a way that we kind of can't fully comprehend or understand today. If we think about a time just over 100 years ago when African human beings were literally kept in zoos in London, in New York, in Paris, that gives us a sense of the strength of colonial propaganda and how deeply it had taken root in this society and others, to the point that it was actually argued by hard science, by people who considered themselves serious academics, that Black people were more closely related to monkeys than to other human beings. But what we know, just as we can see today, that dishonest scholarship can be a tool for profitable foreign policy, so is the case in the past. I think a lot of the time we're led to believe that people actually believed the propaganda of the time, those scholars we're talking about. When we know, just as we can see today, people have more knowledge about what's going on in some country in Africa or Asia that we might be preparing to go to war with, so did they know more back then than we're led to believe. There was no magical time when people who really had knowledge about the world didn't know what was really going on the ground. History was distorted deliberately in particular ways, and that legacy is still with us in many ways. To the point that, even for someone like me, who I'd like to feel lots of my followers are socially engaged, know about the world, when I post pictures, I was in Zimbabwe a couple of weeks ago, this just gives you an example. When I post pictures of the capital city of Zimbabwe, Harare, and they've got skyscrapers and nice hotels and the beautiful jacaranda trees, if you've ever been to Harare, you'll know this. Nice restaurants, people are like, wow, they've got skyscrapers in Africa. I don't know if people think people in Africa still live in mud huts. I don't know if people believe, as you're going to see over the next half an hour, there was ever a time when everyone in Africa lived in mud huts. But the strength of propaganda, even for people of African origin, is still with us to that point that we have this thing called Black History Month. Now, for those who don't know, the idea for Black History Month was invented or came up with by an African-American scholar called Carter G. Woodson. He wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Negro, which looked at the way in which African-Americans had to be functionally miseducated for transatlantic slavery and then the subsequent Jim Crow apartheid to function in America. But I would take what Woodson was saying, although I agree with him one step further, and I would say that for racism to function in human society, full stop, everyone has to be functionally miseducated about the human story. And no part of the human story, in my view, has been more distorted than the history of the African continent and then its descendants. So I'm going to try and share, in half an hour, tens of thousands of years of history with you very quickly, some of the snapshots of what we should be teaching, because if we're not careful, what happens is Black History Month comes around and we do exactly what it was not supposed to be intended to do.